Hey, good morning, Eastern Oregon. How are you today on this Tuesday, September 28th on EOAlive, AM on, boy, I messed that up. AM on EOAlive, your connection to Eastern Oregon. Yeah. How are you, man?
Already bumbling words.
I know it.
Just the day's already just getting started.
I know. Well, it's raining out there. I mean, it's like, look at that. Fall is like moving in. The trees are changing. It's here.
You know me. I want
I know you love the
and
cold.
sunny. 70's fine. I do like the cold. But I don't like the wet.
Is that
I don't
the
like
deal?
the rain. I don't like the snow. I hate snow. I hate rain.
I know. It's like the whining is already beginning. I can just imagine.
Well, do you like rain? What? Somebody just came in. I could hear the dinger.
Sorry. Well,
hey,
I don't love the rain. Yeah.
There's a I was reading a thing on Facebook. It's a local person, and I ain't gonna say no names, but they were like basically like kind of complaining, not complaining, but like, like, wasn't National Sons and Daughters Day just like in August, this, that, they're just a ploy of people trying to get you to put your personal information in on Facebook. And somebody said, it's also drink a beer day. Who would have thought? The comment. I was cracking up. Like, because the person was like basically saying, don't put all your personal information out there. Like, we're having all these days because they're just tricking you to get you to put your, personal information in. And the guy just said, it's also drink a beer day. Who would have thought? Like Facebook, or if you're on Facebook, they already have you. If you have a cell phone, for crying out loud, they got your stuff. Like, stop worrying about petty stuff, for crying out loud.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, I get that.
I mean, like, everybody talks about, that the vaccination might have a chip in it. It's like, dude, like, they know where you're at. Everybody has one of these. Like, stop worrying about dumb stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we had a good the city of LeGrand had a COVID forum last night.
Yeah, people were pretty well behaved too.
Yeah, we facilitated that. It wasn't our thing; it was a city thing, but we facilitated it and hosted it, and yeah, it was good. I thought it was, and there were 3 doctors and 1 nurse, and or 4 medical professionals, I guess I should say it that way. And I mean, it went really well. And you're right, people were fairly. They did pretty well. Yeah.
Hey, EOU men's basketball released their schedule. Guess where they're playing on October 30th?
Where?
Gonzaga. They're playing in Spokane against Gonzaga on October 30th. That gets EOU so much money. Gonzaga pays these schools to come in and they just get bucket wins, right? We'll probably lose by 100. I mean, right. Just being honest. But they'll get to play, in the number 2 team in the country last year. I mean, NCAA. And that'll be a great experience for these guys.
So why hasn't that? I mean, how did that work out this year that it hasn't?
So the details on that is we have a transfer that played his freshman year at Gonzaga that's playing at EOU, and his brother-in-law was All-American at EOU.
Okay.
And I mean, not at EOU, at Gonzaga. I'm sorry. His brother-in-law was an All-American at Gonzaga. So there's a tie there. And then Pennington played his freshman year at Gonzaga. So he knows all the guys that are there now are seniors that he played with. And now he's at EOU and playing. He'll start for EOU this year. Pennington will.
And break it down a little bit further for us non-sports guys. So the significance of us playing there is we just EOU gets exposure.
No, the significance is those guys get to play against one of the top teams in the country at the NCAA level, and we get a big fat check from Gonzaga for going there and playing.
Really?
Which is going to help a lot during COVID times. Yeah, that's how it works.
No, what do you mean they pay? So explain
that.
Well,
okay, so if you go to a Gonzaga game, there's 25,000 people in the stands. 20,000 people. Okay. So EOU, they pay small schools to come in and get bucket wins, is what we call them. Like it's almost it's like guaranteed wins for their. It doesn't help their RPI, but it does help their overall record. So the people will come in, smaller schools, and Eastern's done it before. I mean, I think in 2014, I think we played Gonzaga, but it's a good experience for the kids. They get to go play in Spokane in a huge arena, and then EOU basketball gets some money out of it too.
Oh, that's good.
Pretty cool, yeah.
Good
Exciting.
deal.
Max's last year, super senior, all-time leading scorer. Going to add to that list.
Yeah, so do we pay teams that come in No.
No. Like, well, who we pay? Should make it a community college?
I don't know. I don't know how that works. I'm just like exploring it. Yeah.
Well, we're NAIA, so I mean, a lot of teams won't. Like big time teams wouldn't come here to play.
Right.
There's no point. They can't make any money off of it. Like they ain't gonna fill. Even if Gonzaga came here, where would everybody sit in Quinn?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's basically reverse.
See, and I guess I didn't have any idea. I thought teams played each other just because it was competitive. I didn't have any idea that
everything's all about this.
We get a part of the gate, and so hey, we want to go play there. Is that essentially?
They'll say, hey, EOU will reach out, or they'll reach out to EOU, and it'll be like, okay, how are we going to work this out? How much money do you guys need? We'll pay your travel, all this, come play us, and then we'll give you this much money. And that's how like, so like if EOU were to make the playoffs, right?
Right.
So say the football team makes the playoffs, right? We're 18th in the country. We lost Saturday, so we dropped 7 spots. We were 11th. If we make the playoffs, we don't pay to go on that trip. The conference does.
Okay.
So like the Cascade Collegiate Conference would pay like the lodging, the travel, all that. It's just the way it works. Yeah.
All right.
It's all about money.
Hey, thank you. Okay, well, hey, let's look at the weather, man.
Let's get some weather and get a guest in here.
Yeah.
Oh, rain, gloom, and drizzle. Winds increase. It's only going to get up to 54 today.
I think we got I think somewhere in here somewhere in these graphics we need to have a picture of you, like with a smiley face or with a wine or what.
I can just put them up there. Bam.
Yeah. Be like, oh, that sucks.
I'm okay with this as long as it's not raining. 54 is fine.
All right, and then tomorrow, kind of
Better.
the same, and then I guess
warms up.
Yeah, not as much rain, but the temperature is,
I know we need the rain, so I can't
Mid-60s.
really hate on it. I know we need it, so I mean I can't hate on the rain, but I just when you have metal in your body and you had a bunch of surgeries, the rain, man, for some reason
does it just get on you?
Oh gosh, beats you down.
Yeah, and hey, that's Gabe, our weather kid, and thanks Nate Conklin for sponsoring our weather stuff.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Well, hey, let me bring in our guest. And Mike McDowell is joining us this morning. And I met Mike this weekend at the lake. We struck up a conversation, and Mike is a graduate of LHS here, and then he's kind of have a variety of life. He's involved in housing, which is relevant to almost all communities. And so I'm glad to have you with us here, Mike. Kind of start with telling us about you. Give us a thumbnail version of you graduated from here. Kind of tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks, Brent, and Dodsey. Thanks for having me on this morning. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, I am a 1988 graduate of LeGrand High School. Go Tigers! And was certainly I'm having a hard time though, as I want to go up and visit the high school, because there's less and less teachers that actually taught me in terms of the time I was here, really from 1982 when I was a 12-year-old all the way up to 18. And then, so anyway, so I graduated, played sports, did all that kind of stuff. Played for Jeff Quinn, whom I just saw at the football game against College of Idaho. His son is doing great stuff as a quarterback for Eastern, and it was kind of neat to see him as well as watch his son. And we had just a great day, but it's good to come back to reconnect with folks. I left in 1988, went to school in Florida. I played on a basketball scholarship, and then finished my collegiate career at Eastern Montana, which is Montana State Billings today. And I was in education, teaching and coaching basketball. Was at NNU for a short time with Rich Sanders and his staff there, and then ended up joining the Marine Corps in would have been November of 2000. 16 years later, I retired after 6 combat tours, and was really fortunate to really launch into another career. Well, I've had several careers, but as a Marine officer, as a retiree, getting into services to veterans and those kind of things, and that's kind of where I am. And my family and I live in Lavernia, Texas, where we have a business there. We've purchased an old golf course, the old Pecan Valley Golf Course, which is one point was the 1968 PGA Championship course, and so we bought that in 2018, and we're building 1,400 units of affordable workforce housing unit in terms of a campus for transitioning veterans. It's a program that I built in my doctoral work at USC and last 3.5 years, and I think we're on to something really kind of special. So it's, again, exciting always to come back to LeGrand. Number one, to get out of the Texas heat as it's kind of wrapping up, still in triple digits sometimes during the high part of the day. But it's nice to come here, even in the rain, Dotsy. And really wonderful. So I'm blessed.
I'm trying to get down to Texas. Like during the fall, one of my best friends is the head football coach at Blinn.
Okay.
And Blinn's a top community college in the country, football wise. And
well,
I just need to see some Texas football, man. It's different.
Well, I will tell you, my son plays at UIW, University of Incarnate Word. So he's a long snapper there. He's redshirting this year. But you talk about the guarantees with game guarantees. They're Division I FCS. So they're in the same conference in the Southland Conference, but they're in the same, as Montana State, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota State, all those schools, very competitive. But they ended up playing some FBS schools over the history of their time as an FCS member. And so they played Texas State last week. And of course they get a $300,000 guarantee to play them at their place. And then they of course beat them at their place. So you ain't going to get too many of those opportunities. Win-win. No. And let me just say, that's the problem with FBS schools or Division I like Gonzaga. If a school like Eastern could ever go and actually pull out a win, it's really a no-winner for them essentially, because they just it's like Dotsy talks about. It's about the relationship that they have, and it's big for recruiting. Recruiting is a huge functionality when you can go to that kid who's a marginal Division I kid, and he wants to play maybe at Eastern. He'd be a great NAI, NCAA Division II type player. That's when you can snag him. You say, hey, we're going to play Gonzaga next year, or we're going to play University of Oregon or whatever. Yep. So those are real. Little teaser. So anyway, I just want
my son is a long snapper too. He's been long snapping since he was 8. He's a sophomore. He's on varsity. He plays for Dallas High School on the west side.
Yeah.
He plays defensive end, center, and then long snapper. And he's a phenomenal long snapper. I told him, you work hard at long snapping, you might get a ride and never have to get hit in your whole life.
It's a gem, and I will tell you, any parent that has a football, is like, oh my God, I don't want to get my kid's bell rung every play. Long snapping is fantastic because
they don't get hit.
They don't get hit anymore. Back in the day, they used to, but not anymore. And I'll tell you, you can get a Division I scholarship, and going to camp and doing those things. So it's really a neat little hidden, a little secret there. So that's good.
They get injured less than punters and kickers.
I like it. I absolutely
crazy.
Like it. Now the thing, now Dodsy would say, now this is Dodsy, this. If your son or daughter, in these day and age, if either one of them long snap, you can tell you have a really good long snapper because the fans will never know who they are, and that's right. A good thing.
Only time they ever know is when it's bad. Yep.
When they know your kid's name, that's bad because then you're not quite getting it all the way over there. You're shooting it over their head for massive loss of 30 yards, but it is pretty special to see your kid thrive like that. So. Congrats.
It's different too. My son's a lefty, so he's a left-handed long snapper, so the ball spins the other way.
Well, their whole world is upside down and backwards. So, you think it kind of fits their personality, especially being lefty.
Too.
So
he's
anyway.
goofy. Yeah.
That is kind of funny. I've never thought about it. So you're kind of essentially passing between your legs. Is that kind of how?
Yeah. There's a drill you do where you hold the ball above your head and you just bam over and over again. He's been doing it since he was 8 years old, and then you just emulate that bent over. A long snap is generally like for a punt 15 yards. So you got to get it back there quick. So you're chucking it and you're using your whole body. It's almost like rowing kind of. You're just cranking that body back and putting that spin on the ball, and it's pretty fun to watch, actually.
Well, and it actually, in terms of your point, is that it really highlights the athletic guy, because football has progressed in so many ways. Back in the day, it was pure, a real power game. Now with splits the way they are on the offensive line of scrimmage, it's about speed and maneuverability. So you're not going to get the big, huge, luggy looking, center that you would normally get during the course of the offensive part of the ball. You're getting that they want an athletic guy to get down the field. And so now you got a kid. So it's great for kids in small towns, because if you can master that and you're athletic, you don't have to be 6'5", 260, in order to be a college Division I long snapper. They want someone that can get down and run sub 5, second or 5, second 40s, and get down the field quickly. But again, it's for someone like LeGrand or some of these other smaller schools, it's hard sometimes to get the eyeballs of the big Division I programs. So when you look at coaches, they'll sit there with a see, anybody can be a prospective Division I snapper, because they're just looking at tape and they want to know 0.7 seconds is the standard for Division I. So they want that standard. So from the time they move the ball to the time that it hits the snappers, or the 14 yards away, to Dodsey's point, then they stop the clock. So again, you don't have to be a hog up front. They want athleticism, and you see that now. If you look at the long snapping rosters online, and see LS, it says they're not that big.
No.
So anyway,
well,
but anybody can
my son though, he's 6'5", 235 as a sophomore, and he is big.
Wow.
But he's super athletic.
You feed him raw eggs or what?
Christmas. Well, you haven't stood next to me. I'm 6'5", 300. He's a big boy, man. He is.
Well, that's good. Can't teach big.
No.
Big guys.
But I want him to play baseball. I don't want him to play football. He's a left-handed pitcher.
Well, there you go.
Because Dodsey was a baseball player. He's a baseball dude. Yeah,
I'm a baseball dude. But I do love football and basketball. And so I'm starting to get into soccer too. It's weird. I never thought I'd like soccer, but I got some guys up at EOU that I've grown pretty fond of, and they've kind of they're kind of teaching me the ropes of soccer. It's different.
The women, I went up there on Friday night. I thought there was a game. I didn't realize that I was trying to get to the LeGrand game, but the Estacada game was on Thursday, so it was a weird set. But I went up there and watched the women's EOU's team, and they were fantastic. I mean, very, very, and very aggressive. I mean, we're talking very physical game, and if you like a lot of scoring, I mean, they were always around the net, and it was really their leadership was fantastic. I was very impressed with them, and think that they have a great team. I'm going to follow them. So
they're a perennial top 10 in the nation. I mean, they make the national tournament every year. They're good. Yeah, they're good.
Yeah. So there was a period, I knew that you and Dodsey would really connect, because there was a period of time, Mike, where you thought maybe you were going to be an AD. Yeah. I mean, talk about that a little bit.
It's funny, because when I left the Marine Corps, one of the challenges we have as transitioning service members is really, what are we going to do next, right? And that's, and Brent, you and I have talked about this when we were over at the cabins, at Level Lake, and that's probably the most difficult problem, and that's what I've studied for the last 3 years, is the problem of practice of why some vets do well and other ones don't, right? And we say, well, Dodsey was a service member. He just isn't thriving right now as a 1 or 2 year veteran. And you're like, well, why is that? He's got PTSD, and that's actually not it. And so one of the things that I found in my research was, one, on the front end of these experiences, these kids we recruit to put them on yellow. When we talk about yellow footprints, during the boot camp process and transition them into a socialized system, they've never lived autonomously as an adult. And so one of the things that I've been very, very focused on is that transition, because I struggled coming out, even as a field grade Marine officer, in terms of my brand, my individual branding. And, as a former teacher, I could have gone back in education, which is kind of what I wanted to do, to your point. I wanted to get into higher education, leadership and particularly in athletics, because that's something I've always been a part of as an athlete and a coach. I coached at Baker High School back in the day and in the early or mid 90s before I went to Northwest Nazarene University. And so I've always liked that, but again, that's what my goal was. And so that's one of the reasons I started the doctoral program at USC in 2018, because I wanted to position myself in such a way that I could be competitive. But the problem is when we get out, we don't have any, we have the drive to do it, but we don't have 15 years of industry experience in athletic administration or in operations in higher or in, in entertainment. For example, if you go into NBC Universal for a potential job or whatever, you're going to get beat out by the person that's got 15 years of experience. So that's just always what happens at that level of leadership. Now you can always go into entry level positions, but for a guy that is, at that time I was 46, and I've been an executive leader, I need to make six figure, I need to make a certain amount of money. And I was in Los Angeles at the time. And so you just can't, even with a pension, I couldn't land those jobs. And so that's one of the things that, I went back to school and to be competitive, hopefully, to get that branding. It's all network, as we've talked about offline, Brent, and really started building those relationships. Steve Lopes, who was at USC, he's kind of my mentor. Was there for 34 years before he left. And Mike Izzy, who was he's the athletic director at Cal State Northridge. Before that, he was at Irvine, UC Irvine. He was a Stanford guy. I mean, it's all who you know, and it's a very, very close society. So that's, and I never did go that direction. I mean, I just couldn't get a job, and a lot of times they hire from within. So if you're not that junior guy who's making $40,000 a year, they got to give them the first cut, which I understand, in terms of their progression. But I was a guy that couldn't come in at that price point, in terms of earning level to survive. You can't do it in LA, not with a family. And so
not even close.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was my experience. And so that's one of the reasons I got involved with what I do now, particularly about transitioning veterans better, because we want to rebrand them. Again, they've never lived autonomously as an adult, as a 17, 18-year-old kid before they went in the Marine Corps or whatever branch of service. And so they've never, what I found in my research is they just don't have any financial acumen. They don't know how to balance their budget. They don't know how to buy insurance. They don't know how to invest. They don't know how to, they lived in the barracks, so they've never learned how to cook food. They've never learned how to shop. They don't know how to do these basic adulting skills. And that's one of the things that we've been really focused on in building the Valor Club, which is going to be a 200-acre campus that's going to, I think, it's going to reframe the way that we transition veterans. I think better, with not only more success in terms of employment, but longitudinal employment with meaningful careers, not just jobs, because that's not intrinsically motivating. So those are the things that we're focused on and really committed. So it's weird how God kind of shuts one door quickly and not what I wanted. I mean, it's my plan here. I've got it, in my plan, but it's amazing how doors shut and then open up for ways that you can't even begin to understand yet. You will over time as we reflect as people. So
I have a question, Mike. First off, Marines are my favorite. My grandfather was a Marine for 24 years. He was a master gunnery sergeant. He served in Korea and Vietnam when he was 16 years old. And then went on to become a warden in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He was a double fed guy. And
I'll tell you right now, Dotsie, your value just went up 10% by knowing that you were related to a Marine. So anyway,
yeah, my grandfather. Oh, look, I mean, that's for my grandpa right there on my arm.
Get some.
Yeah, I mean that's in memory of my grandfather.
What was his name?
His name was Dorman Johnson. He was in E9 in the Marine Corps. Yeah,
Salty.
Master gunnery sergeant.
Salty.
There's a video. I have a video of him with no So there's no audio because this was during Vietnam or right around that time. And he's standing out in front of, because he ran all the mess halls. He was in charge of all the mess halls. And he's standing out there with Charlton Heston. There's no sound, but they're standing out there talking, and you can see mortars going off in the hills. It's a remarkable
day
video.
In the office.
And then I also have my grandpa didn't like writing. So he had a tape recorder, and he would send my grandmother tapes when he was in Vietnam. He would just record himself talking. And I have all of those.
Really?
Cool.
I would highly recommend putting those things down into the cloud at least, or because those tapes go over time, they just don't last. So make sure that's archivable material that we would send to DC to keep, because it's critically important to get that message and to push that on, it was
so different back then.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is this. So you talk about transition, like basically we're looking at guys that go into the military, into the Marine Corps, whatever. They're 18. They're moving right out of their parents' house. So they've had people cooking for them, helping them, they don't have any idea how to live. So when they come out, they might be 40 and it's like an 18-year-old basically that's moving out on their own for the first time. So is that a societal thing, or is there like, is it societal pressure on these people, like, oh, you have to conform, you got to do this a certain way? Because I know like people talk about in the military, like they're reprogramming you, kind of like they're and you always have that person that's right there telling you, button your shirt, get on,
Sure.
Here's your bed. Well, when they come out, they lose that, right? Is that what this program is on?
It really is. And let's just take some assumptions. Okay. First of all, as inherently dangerous as the military can be, again, using your grandfather or anybody that has had that context, it's very stable. It's a socialized system where everything's taken care of for you. So again, to your point, you have an identity. You have a job, and you're proud of that job. You have a rank. You have a tribe. It's very social, culturally, very, very important. Just so you understand, my background, my expertise is in non-traditional learners. So when I got my doctorate's in ed leadership, but it's focused on educational psychology. So it's kind of the how of why we learn, right? And how we can maximize that exposure to content, to taking it from really working memory to long-term memory, things that we just do involuntarily without thinking. So to your point, it's not having a context of living as a civilian, autonomous civilian, as they come out, because now, Dodsey, congratulations, you did 4 years. And by the way, 70% of our veterans don't do what they did in the military. So if you think, well, he's going to get that experience and that job skill, and then he's going to just naturally convert and go work wherever, you're terribly mistaken. And either as an employer trying to recruit these guys into your businesses, most of us, I speak of the Marine Corps and the Army, the majority of our people are combat arms people. So they're infantry, artillery. I was an artilleryman. You got tankers, you got all these other, types of specific combat driven things that aren't going to have a natural pathway into the civilian sector. So they have to be retrained. And unfortunately today, to your point, it's not like back after Vietnam where you could go to the mill at Boise Cascade or wherever at the time wise, you could get on a broom, start sweeping it and working over time. And in a couple of years, you could be working your way up into more leadership position based upon your hard skills. The problem, we don't have soft skills. The soft skills are where we struggle. We don't have the ability to articulate ourselves using vernacular that's appropriate in the civilian sector. Dodsey, I could go to your grandpa and I'd say, hey, you got crud on your, and in so many ways, you got stuff on your face, and he would go, oh, okay. And he'd wipe it off. That's because I love him. I mean, he's my brother, but if I do that to somebody that's a sensitive civilian, and then they go, oh my gosh, I was just totally offended by that, because I used a curse word or whatever. Hey, fix yourself, then they go to HR and then they're wondering why they get, they just, that's a symbol. And then they feel like it's us versus them. That's our mindset. And that's where the system is not set up for success. And that's where I had these experiences as an individual. And I said, if I'm having a hard time as a field grade Marine officer, how's a Lance Corporal going to do it? And so, that's where I just started really unpacking this thing and looking at it from the lens, not only as a Marine officer, but as a scholar and a practitioner from that lens, when I was interviewing, doing our qualitative interviews, I did a mixed method. So I did surveys and then also interviews, personal interviews, because I wanted to capture that ethnological experience, right? That so many of us miss during a survey. It just doesn't come up. And then when you start peeling them, and I'm interviewing Brent, based on his, and I don't necessarily know what he wrote in his survey, but I can ask him, hey, Brent, what, tell me a little bit about your transition. Are you doing what you thought you were going to do, or whatever it might be? And then you really get a lot of spin off that. You're like, man, I didn't ask the right question. It should have been this. And then I'm able to capture that. So those are the things I think are really critically important. And I think, again, the DOD is never going to get this right. Department of Defense, they're as much as they try, they give Dotsy or Brent, you're going to take a week-long course prior to your times getting out. That's not effectively giving you the tools that you need to have. You've given a 6-part folder to me saying, hey, call these numbers. Because, by the way, when I leave and get my EAS, which is my end of active duty service, like my report card from the military, everybody that has one, everyone that served has one. So if you ask them, hey, show me your DD-214, they should have that. That's your snapshot. They are immediately stripped and divorced of the tribe. I mean, instantaneously. And so if I've taken Brent and he's put his foot on the footprints, and he's been a part of a unit with tight cohesion, and they've deployed twice, and they've lost brothers and sisters, and there's a tremendous family there. And then when it's lost, then he goes into isolation. Think about that. That doesn't even align itself to be successful. And so, in Los Angeles, for example, we have there's over 80,000 homeless people there. And when I was in LA, I was a veteran commissioner, and I have over 6,000 homeless vets. Oh. And that's problematic in the sense that, these vets get thrown into isolation. They go to LA because they want to be actors or whatever they want to do. And I can't think of a worse place to send them, because not that the people in LA aren't wanting to help them, but they can never own a home there. They'll never own anything because they can't afford, even with the VA loan with zero money down, they can't do it. And that's where they go into what we call temporarily unsheltered conditions, which isn't chronically homeless yet, but then they start self-medicating with this great experience with marijuana that I don't care what anybody says. It isn't a physically addictive drug, but it's psychologically addictive. And when guys are struggling, men and women both that are veterans, anybody that's in distress starts smoking that stuff or doing whatever they're in, or doing the edibles or whatever, for sleep, for example, because they can't wind down, then they become psychologically dependent upon it. And that's why we have to surround them, not just by building homes. That's a part of a solution, but that's not comprehensive, and you're not going to solve the problem. So that's what we've been trying to get done, is develop a wraparound program for this. And I will state, we have other issues in terms of special needs, Black and brown community. That is a completely different requirement for transitioning service members. Do they know what kind of conditions they're going to go into after they're done? Yeah, they were in a socialized system where everybody's drinking from the same canteen, but in actuality, they're not really ready to go off and live in communities where they think they're going to be completely integrated without major, with just knowing where they're going to go into, I think is extremely helpful. And I think that we can create these training programs. I call them adulting classes, really, learning how to
basically,
function. So anyway, so hopefully that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but
yeah, it is. I mean, it kind of lays the groundwork for. I have another question for you though. So check this one out. Sure. I think about this all the time, and it's something that like constantly comes up in my head. I feel like our society, like as a whole, outside of the military, really sets up veterans to fail, because when people come out of the service, right? Who's going after those guys, if anybody? Police, right? They want veterans to become cops. And I'm 100% against that, almost 100% of the time, just for the simple reason that you're programmed in the military to do different things, like almost the opposite of what you would be programmed to do as a police officer, unless you've had MP training. Mm-hmm. And so what's your take on that? Like, do you feel like society puts this like, puts former military guys in a box, like here's what you can do, here's all you can do, you know what I mean? Like,
well, I mean, that's a great inquiry, because I don't, and this is anecdotal, I don't have any specific data that support what I'm about to say, but I think from a general's perspective, because they're toting around a weapon all the time, not I would say all the time, because that's really a misnomer as well. We have 23 inherent missions in the Marine Expeditionary Unit mission, right? So those we call them MUs, or when they're on a ship and they're out on, you see, like, for example, Afghanistan during the I'll just say there was the effectiveness of the withdrawal was open for conjecture, and I'll leave it at that.
yeah.
But those
Good
individuals, well, that was a MU that was there, so they're within 72 hours usually of them. They can be any position to help support the president's initiative, and and with a MU, you don't have to have Congress, approve state of war in order to bring those people. But for 23 inherent missions that we have in the military for those MUs, a lot of them are NEOs, which are non-combat evacuation operations. We have other type. We can certainly do a kinetic raid, or humanitarian mission. We can do all sorts of things. So to pigeonhole everybody into this, infantry person mindset where they just shoot and kill everything they see, and that is a mission in the military, but that's not all of them. So they are much more rounded in terms of the train. And again, it comes back to training. It comes back to training, and then also leadership to support and reinforce that training. So are they a natural competitor? Is there a natural progression into law enforcement? Yes. I don't have the numbers of that, but a big chunk of them are. And I think a lot of it is from the collegiality side, from the team building side. They love, police, fire people, fire men and women, any medical, all that stuff is, triage. It's extremely stressful, but it really drives interest of people that have been in that world in the military. Because what I share with veterans as they lead out, and I probably get a dozen calls a day with people leaving that I know personally, or sometimes out of the blue. What's the biggest advice I can give you, in terms of expectation management? And I always state to them, accept the fact you'll never have the intimacy of the unit that you had in terms of collegiality, brother and sisterhood. It will never be like that in the civilian sector. Okay, just accept that, and embrace what you did before, but don't wear it on your sleeve. Rebrand yourself as a civilian, because again, it becomes an us versus them mindset that, oh, these civilians are nasty, they don't do this, that, and the other. And so one of the things that, to your point with, again, going into law enforcement, I think it is a natural progression, but I think also those of us that have struggled from PTS, or, you have to resolve those issues. And it's not always, we've broken down significant barriers in terms of mental and behavioral health acceptance, right? But it's still not there in terms of the knowledge, motivation, organizational influences to get that kind of treatment, and that kind of support. Because if I want to be a cop, it's probably not very likely I'm going to go see mental and behavioral health, because I don't want that to come into the interview process. So in order to be a good cop, or be a good dentist, or be a good teacher, I have to get those wraparound services to be effective. So if we create these barriers, these unfair barriers, I think, because just because you go see somebody in mental and behavioral health, it doesn't define you. And I think it has before, but I also think it holds people back from being the best they can be. And so I think, again, another long-winded answer to your question, but I think it begs the discussion further on is that the right fit for you? And we're going through a significant change in our country today in terms of law enforcement, in terms of what the government supports. They can't get enough law enforcement officers, and they are peace officers. They're there 90% of the time, if not more, to help serve the people, not kinetically, but being able to go in there and deconflict, and help stabilize very unstable situations where people are at their worst. And so it takes a lot of guts and a lot of attributional skills as well as some self-efficacy and other things to be an effective police officer. So, but there's going to be a gap, and guess what? They serve us, and if we don't have that kind of support, you can't have liberty. You can't have an effective government without stability. I mean, companies aren't going to come in. I mean, look at Afghanistan. I mean, we've been there for 20 years. I've spent a lot of my life there. And if you can't get basic security services with law enforcement to go in and support the people without going and stealing stuff inside, if they do a raid inside of a person's house that they're stealing stuff internally, I mean, that ruins the narrative. So again, you got to be a locked on individual to be a police officer. And there are dirtbags. Let's be honest. I mean, there are people who abuse the badge who, but I don't think that majority. I think that it's a very, very small majority. And most of it, honestly, has come from poor hiring techniques, poor leadership in terms of the senior level, and resourcing people with training. That's where people get in trouble. And we forget that and say, well, just defund it. I mean, I don't want to get political about it, but I just think this reasonable person approach, to helping people. But again, I think it can still be a good career for young people leaving the service and find meaningful. I mean, it's got to be meaningful employment and careers.
So let's good stuff. Let's pivot for just a minute. I'm buying a golf course. That seems outrageous. Talk about the journey to do that a little bit, if you would.
Well, I met my business partner, Erwin Deutsch. He's very, very, very one of the wisest men I think I've ever met. He's a former he's a former tax attorney, which is amazing how the pathway they come to entrepreneurship. But he was a graduate from Michigan with his law degree back in the late 60s, and was in Washington. He actually wrote the legislation that went into law for what we know today as affordable housing. So he's an expert. He's been doing that, for 5 decades, really. And so he asked me. We met through the former governor of California, whose wife was on my board at the Soldiers Project down in Los Angeles. And we met together, and he said, "Hey, we're going to buy a golf course. I want you to be my chief of staff, and we want to do this for veterans." And incredibly kind and knowledgeable individual. And I said, "Well, let's do it. Let's talk about it." And so we purchased this golf course in 2018. It was a very famous golf course in the southeastern part of Texas, or San Antonio. So it's kind of a poorer area today. A large amount of black and brown population. It's quite frankly kind of a food desert. They've had some issues in terms of bringing in, and a food desert by definition is fresh fruits and vegetables within 2 miles, right? As a range ring. So it's been very, very poor, but there's a huge amount of manufacturing there. So you got Toyota, which was at Torrance, California. They moved to Austin. Now they have the Tacoma Tundra factory there in San Antonio. And then we've got HEB, which is like a Safeway, and the distribution and manufacturing. They're there. We've got Holt Caterpillar. Peter Holt owns the Spurs, but that's one of the largest dealerships of Caterpillar in the nation. And so there's huge amounts of manufacturing there. So when we built the golf course around there, or when it's there, we took it over. It's been overgrown. Basically, everything's still there. But the goal was we wanted to develop a campus of affordable housing. And we wanted to do, and again, Erwin's the expert on this. Again, I'm learning. If I can remember what he's forgotten, I'll be very successful. But again, my expertise is in my doctorate work, as I said, is in educational psychology. So I can teach you all you need to know about learning as a non-traditional learner, which veterans are. But his expertise is in that, and is bringing money and buckets of money into play so that we can create a value proposition for developers, as well as the city, who's now our partner. So we're really excited about that. I've worked really hard for that. So the goal was with the golf course is the spatial part of it, because again, it's all overgrown. So we had Gensler, who's our architect, national renowned, I guess, architect, and they built a model for us in terms of a master plan, including 1,400 units of affordable workforce housing. And then we're also building 53 single-family units that'll be there. Lennar's going to be our partner on that. And then we're building an education center. We're going to have a hub with a beautiful restaurant there on the 9th hole. We're going to bring back 9 holes of golf. Again, it'll play 18, just like we are here in LeGrand at the Country Club. And because I think the recreation component is really important for veterans. So as they transition from service, or if they've already been transitioning for service, they're already out, as well as their family members, they can come too. That was one of the important things that I had specifically for Irwin. I said, I'll only be a part of this if families can be a part of it too, because they've served. And so Dodsey, if he wanted to even go, even having a grandpa, if he's been around in the culture and understands it, he could live with us. And we could, so it doesn't have to be the direct veteran. We want to make it as wide as possible, because I don't want this to be, it's transitional housing. I don't want it, but now I'm not going to kick him out. Dodsey, I mean, you're there, but I want to be able to articulate the importance of get your training. You come there, you get your training. I don't care what it's in, but it's going to be something. You're not just going to fog up a mirror. You're going to go there and you're going to specifically learn a skill. You can go through vocational skills training. You can do a terminal degree. You want to go to UIW. You want to go to San Antonio, UT San Antonio, wherever. And then, so that's going to be there. And then I have wraparound services that are going to be specifically designed to get you the comprehensive support you need, whatever that might be. Resume development, learning how to do interviews, could be mental and behavioral health. Maybe you have some other physical issues that have to be resolved. And then at that next stage, then offer of course, recreation component, which is the golf course. And then at the last, it's tying it in with these companies that I mentioned and other emerging companies to hire these veterans that are now kind of pick of the litter. They kind of feel like, with Dodsey, talk about being a 5-star athlete, blue chip, recruit. It is absolutely critical that we find pathways for these veterans to go into service and as a civilian, almost kind of creating that marketing, that marketing step of, you're still serving, just different uniform, kind of way I feel about what we're doing. And because there's significant benefits for companies in terms of federal tax benefits, as well as just having patriotic duty we owe these veterans who have served us to come in and work with us. But I don't want to create that thing like what Dodsey talked about, like with his grandpa. If he was to transition in the civilian sector, there's things that we can do to help his grandpa if he was to stay there, or anybody, to help let them become a better employee. Again, speaking well, articulating, and then also having you come in and share what you do ahead of the recruiting process, so veterans don't know what's out there. Right. They don't know what manufacturing is. I think one of the biggest, I will tell you, there's a train wreck coming in this country, and it's not because people aren't willing to buy stuff. It has to do with manufacturing. And if we're not able to create basically pipelines of talent, we're going to go into a recession unlike we've seen anything. And we see it now, particularly with product. If you're trying to buy anything now, I was trying to buy a fifth wheel, a 2-axle, 14,000 pound, 20-foot gooseneck trailer in Texas, and they're made there. I've been waiting for almost 4 or 5 months for one trailer, which never even showed up. I had to buy something else because of supply chain. Steel is extremely expensive. It's gone up. We all know that. Lumber now has come down a little bit. But then the other problem is that they don't have talent. They don't have people to manufacture it. These young people are not going into these professions. And that's a problem.
They're right here.
Well, I mean, and I just don't know. And again, Dodsey, is it a functionality of those companies aren't marketing effectively, or is it an educational function in terms of they just don't know what's out there, or they think it's like grandpa's job at Ford, putting bolts in frames for 40 years, standing on his feet. That's not a good perception to a veteran, because again, I want to go to college. They got all this GI Bill. Yeah, well, it's great. But if you don't really know and you're not passionate about what you're doing to go into that, you're wasting time and resources where you can go in and become a vocational, be an electrician journeyman or plumber or pipe fitter or carpenter, where you can come out and make gobs of money and then maybe start your own business. And then entrepreneurship, veterans are really good at entrepreneurship, but they all seem to want to make beer. They want to be beer.
I have a bunch of veteran buddies that own breweries.
I just want to take them and shake them. I'm like, listen, do it as a hobby, but it's a saturated market. I mean, it's just what, I'm kind of half joking.
Marines in Salem, 3 Marines, Vagabond Brewing. My boy
Well,
AJ.
I mean, you tell him, you got this Marine officer that told him directly as a direct order, get out of beer, make the beer on the side, but get it, but it is really, they don't know it's out there, because how would they? It's a hard, entrepreneurship is very difficult to come out, because you don't know where's there gaps. Brent will tell you from his industry, being in so many different things in life, he's seen where there's gaps. We don't know where you don't rebuild another taco stand. That's stupid, because now you just split market share. Look at it from the strategic perspective, saying, hey, all right, well, but they don't have these things for the taco. Let's build these so that we can then own a market share, in terms of that, or not a market share, but a significant value proposition. So anyway, so that's kind of where we're going with the golf course. And again, another long-winded response, but I think that it'll give us enough of a footprint, in terms of the beach, so to speak. Get on the beach, create our brand. We're also doing advisory services, and so again, another thing, as a little plug, we're going to be working with companies around the country to try to help them build their veteran base, in terms of not only circumventing new talent, but because there's 200,000 vets leaving every year. And so we want to barely be able to pipeline those people to our companies in LeGrand. So what we do is we create some, customized programs to help recruit them, as well as retain them if they have them within their confines of their companies, because it's really important to create that tribe within the tribe. And then also help educate the civilians that are working with veterans, how we operate, how we respond, how we motivate ourselves, how they can motivate us, and we can motivate them without burning bridges and relationships. And so, and at the end of the day, let's be honest, it's about retention. I want to keep veterans employed in your companies. That's the point, because it's so costly. I mean, it takes us statistically between $15,000 and $20,000 to hire the new Dotsy. Okay, Brent. So, when he quits because whether he's mad or angry, whatever, or he's just not happy here. Well,
tipping the light over on the way out.
I mean, hey, that's what I'm saying. But if you look at that, it's a sunk cost for companies. I mean, you're talking about going out recruiting them. You're talking about having your staff stop what they're doing to interview Dotsies and all the other staff. You got 10 candidates or whatever you have, and then you got to train him. Then you got to come over and you got to onboard him in terms of all of his benefits and all the other stuff. And if he leaves within a year, I mean, that's a significant lost thing. So that's why we want to be we've built an advisory, or really a consulting company. I hate to use consulting because everyone can consult, but we want to be able to build relationships with companies, especially smaller and emerging companies, not just the big dogs. I mean, those guys have their own, usually quite a few resources. I'm not saying they do it well, but I think there's some things that we can offer companies. And again, we do it online for folks using Zoom and other training venues and platforms to help them grow their businesses and keep their talent. Because again, if they're in that tribe, it's a cultural functionality. That's why people stay. It's not money. If you think it's money,
it's never money.
No, and that's because it's an extrinsic motivator. It's not an intrinsic motivator. And I always ask people, what's your dream job, Dotsy? I mean, what is your dream job? I mean, what would you do?
Doing it right now.
Well, see, there you go. And at the end of the day, that's what gets you up in the morning, because you actually have a platform and you love what you're doing. You're serving your community. You're passing information around. You're talking sports. People get happy by sitting there watching this. You pull this thing up and we've got some good dialogue going. I just think it's a phenomenal platform to help people. And Brent and I talked about this offline. It's about service to others and finding that capability to do it. It really can change your life. And again, I'm a perfect example. I mean, I find joy in what I do. I would do it if I just get my bills paid. And because again, it helps my recovery in terms of stress, right. Combat stress, because I just took the uniform off. I'm still serving, doing the same thing. It's just different uniform.
Yeah. Right. And here's a quick question. So the checklist, I hate to say it like that, but say you have a Marine or an Army guy coming out, there's got to be some sort of checklist, and it has to start with stabilization, right? We got to get this person stable. And you talked about transitional services and a wraparound. There's got to be drug and alcohol counseling involved in there, because a lot of veterans come out and they already have drug and alcohol problems, right? I mean, it's a normal thing. I mean, I don't want to say normal, but it happens. So is that the first check on that list? Is like, let's get this person stable, and then it's move forward from there. Like, let's get them some training. Let's teach them how to do an interview. Let's teach them how to make a resume. All that is the first box, the stability box.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about our program specifically. Or you're talking about
yeah. No, I'm just talking about your.
Yeah, because the program is a safe housing. If you don't, you can. We have 45,000 nonprofits, registered 501c3s that specifically cater to veterans.
Oh my God!
So there's no shortage of people doing great work. Now,
Right.
I will tell you that it's stovepiped. They don't share information. They don't, because the research data is very important, but they don't share it, and they're also chasing the same dollars in terms of fundraising. So for us, we're a for-profit. Number one, because you can't build $300 million in infrastructure and vertical construction as a nonprofit. You just can't do it, and you got to make money so that you can then scale your model around the country, which is what I want to do. So, and I know this will work. I mean, so it's just a matter of getting that that support. But to your point, if you don't have housing, stable housing, affordable housing, you're never going to create an environment that fosters professional and personal growth. It just won't happen. So if you're living in your car with your kids, mental and behavioral health is number 18 on the priority list. You're just trying to survive the night.
Yeah,
so,
get some food.
Well, it is. And it's not just say, well, we'll build apartments for these people. That's why the joke is, with LASA and all these other organizations in Los Angeles, all these homeless people, well, we'll build housing for them. Well, first of all, it's not possible because there's no housing to build. You just don't build subdivisions of anything there because they're trying to buy motels, but that's a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound. You have to create comprehensive support programs where it's affordable housing. So for us, what we do, and this is why you can do this for any community. That's why Brent and I talked about this offline. We can create housing projects in LeGrand or Wallowa County and Enterprise. We can do all this stuff with the support of what we already have here in terms of residential tax credits. So that's the model that we use to structure our deal with the 1,400 units. And so what that means is the government becomes our partner. So City of San Antonio, you can say the City of LeGrand can do this. You go in and you basically say, hey, we own this land, right? And you can have a note on the land. You don't have to own it outright. But at the end of the day, it's your dirt. And then we come in there and say, we want you to be a 40% partner of ours. So you basically own the land. We lease it back to you for 75 years for $1 a year. Okay. So again, it's a long-term proposition. You and I will be in a box somewhere by the time that this rolls over to the city, which is fine because they got to look at it long-term. So the goal is that they gave us $50 million in tax credits that we can use for our project. So what that means is, let's say the market rate housing is $1,600 a month. So that's what we would pay. The veteran would at market rate conditions. For us, based on the needs of the people and the poverty, whether they're in poverty or whatever, we can offer that rate down sometimes maybe as low as $750 for a very nice 4-level apartment complex with a pool and a fitness center. And it's just a centerpiece, it's just the center of a village. And that's kind of the model. And so you can have them do that and then sell it to developers. So developers come in and buy it, the vertical construction, and they basically own it. They manage it, rent all the units and all that stuff. And then at that point, they get their money based upon market conditions because the delta is covered by the tax credits offered by the city because everybody has it as an incentivization. Because what happens is that the corporate tax that people pay, that's that money because they're getting a benefit on their tax break. It's almost what we do with, anything to do with tax, sheltering money where, like I don't have to pay as many taxes if I buy into that, if that makes sense. The money is still being created. It's not coming out from me, if that makes sense. Gotcha. So, and anyways, there's a lot of information obviously with it, but the goal is that if you can start that model, and then what we're also the city's floating bonds for us as a way of and then possible tax incremental zones increasing zones where if we bring in, because we're going to bring retail in there, right? We're potentially bringing an HEB, which is like a little mini Safeway, right, into the satellite office so that everyone can just walk there. You can walk everywhere. You can go to class there, at a center, at a learning center, which will have 20 different schools that are taught there. But the goal is that when we build these companies, you put a Starbucks in there, you put a local coffee vineyard. We're working with Alpha Coffee, which is a big military-led company out of Salt Lake City. We want to put their stuff in there. And then guess what? When they pay their taxes, guess who gets a cut of that? We do, as an organization, as an incentive to bring in money there and vibrancy into this area that's very neglected. Because again, it's where you have poverty, you're going to have, you're going to have certain populations. And so again, is this for the veterans? Yes, but this is for the community. The community is the overarching support with this, because we want to bring in, I'm trying to bring in a 4,500 seat arena in this area. It's got 8 basketball courts, volleyball court conversions, weight rooms, state of the art, all that stuff, as well as medical support, rehabilitation, PT, all that. But I want graduations there from the school district. I want tournaments there every single weekend, boys and girls. I want the kids busy. I want them, we're building the 9 holes of golf. We're going to build a foot golf course, which is, I've never heard foot golf. I didn't hear about it for about 6 months ago. And then my architect came back and said, what do you think of it? I said, it's a great idea. You play golf, for example, is like a dying breed. It's dying. I mean, there's no ROI on a golf course. Let me just tell you that right now. So you have to do a great job of recruiting the next generation of golfers. So what we're doing is putting foot golf on there. You play with a soccer ball and you can play at the same time. So if Mike doesn't have any money, and I'm just a poor kid from East Central High School District, Dotsy and Brent, you guys are over with the sticks playing golf. I can actually play with you guys. So I tee it up at the tee with my ball, and then basically I keep track of my strikes, and then I have my own hole at the other end where yours is, and on the same at the endings portion. And so I want PE classes in there. I want that place packed, because those kids they deserve an opportunity to play the links and to put the phone, to your point, Dodsy, put the phone down. No phones. Can't have a phone in there, like a country club almost. But they got to be engaged. They're walking and they're playing. And you know what? And maybe after a while, Brent motivates them and said, Brent, where'd you get your golf clubs? Well, Brent, I'm going to get, you're getting to get new ones. Well, maybe I cut a deal with some kid I'm playing golf with. Hey, I'll give you these for $5, and, they get the golf club, and then they transition from foot golf to golf. And now you've got a lifelong golfer in there. So it's really a hot item around the country, particularly with Black and brown communities, because I love soccer. And I just think it's a great thing. So that's, again, tying it all together into a growth community that I think is going to be really important. I think it's going to work. So.
Wow. Interesting.
It's awesome.
Well, Mike, this has been great. And we'd like to have you back sometime. We'll give us a report, talk to us, and wherever you're from. I mean, you can remote in just like you did. Yeah. You happen to be in our office here, but you can certainly do this from Texas. And
I'd be honored. Anything I can do to help and pass the information forward. And again, we may have veterans that may want to come out and live with us in the next year or two. And as we put butts in beds, I call it, and help them rebrand themselves, and then kick them back into LeGrand, if they want to come back after they get some great training. And but I'm really honored to be here.
So awesome.
Anything I can do to help you guys.
All right. Well, hey, thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, Beck, why don't you just stay here?
Yeah, you can stay. I'll bang it.
Yeah.
Hey, BC.
Yeah.
Did I tell you that I'm starting to take up meditation?
No.
Yeah, I figured it's better than sitting around doing nothing all day.
I knew there had to be a punchline in there somewhere.
On this day in 1542, explorer Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo discovered California at San Diego Bay. He named it San Miguel and claims it for Spain. 1542 on this day. 1787 on this day, Congress sent the Constitution to state legislators for their approval. 1937 on this day, Franklin Delano Roosevelt dedicated Bonneville Dam on the Columbia River right here in Oregon. 1937 on this day. 1987 on this day, Star Trek The Next Generation starring Patrick Stewart debuted on syndicated TV. Now we'll jump all the way to 2019 on this day. Elon Musk unveils his SpaceX spacecraft Starship designed to travel to Mars and the solar system and land back on Earth, which I do believe it has done. The number one song, I went all the way back to 1971 for this because all the other ones were already, I've already put them on. But the number one song in the country on this day, 50 years ago, Rod Stewart, Reason to Believe. Look how young he is.
That hair.
He's so young.
So jealous.
Yeah. Well, my dad had hair like that back in the days. All right, and then my quote for the day to leave on, Albert Einstein: if you want to live a happy life, tie it to a goal, not to people or things. One more time. If you want to live a happy life, tie it to a goal, not to people or things. Albert Einstein.
Another guy with gray hair.
Yeah, right. I'm a hair dude. Well, I got to make up for BC somehow.
The makeup, when you got to put makeup on your forehead. I mean, that's like, and on
I
the
just
top
put a visor on my screen so I don't get the glare off of his forehead.
Yeah.
You can tan off of us.
I don't know. I don't think we don't, and we never see you without a hat. So I'm not sure there is hair there.
He's representing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay.
But see, we get Dotsy on a beard. See, he can't grow anything on his side.
No, I can't. I'm trying. That's the only reason I'm trying to get a little bit more in to get this to connect, but it's not working.
Yeah.
Not working. That's the Indian in me. I don't have hardly any hair on. I mean, my arms have just very little hair at all.
Yeah. Don't go to sleep around cats. They'll lick that off, man. They're rough.
There's just a little bit left. I'm looking like Benny here today. Dang there.
All right. Well, hey, thanks Eastern Oregon for tuning in, and we'll see you Thursday right here. Yep.